Chof Gimel Amud Beis. We'll begin Daf Chof Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom. We learned previously that there was before they instituted the payas to determine who would be Zaycha to the Avodah, they did it by means of a race. There was one time that there was a tragedy. 2 Kahana were running up to Kevish. One was about to win the race, and the other one stabbed him with a knife, and he killed him. So Omar Rav Yitzchak Almaus Ulam V'Amar Achen Beis Yisrael Shimu Harehu Omer Ki Yemotze Chalaba Adam Anon Al Mi Lahavi Al Ir Oila Azores. Rav Yitzchak stood on the malas of the ulam, and we learned before that the ulam doesn't mean the ulam that was in front of the heichal. It was an ulam that was in Har HaBayis. He made a proclamation. He says, if you find a dead body lying and it's not known who killed this person, and it's between cities, the closest city, the Zakanim come and they bring the Egla Rufa and they decapitate it in the Nachal. Over here, in this case over here, that there is this mess over here, who has to bring the Egla Rufa? Is it upon the Chiv, upon the people of Yerushalayim, or on the Azor? Is it on the responsibility of the Kahanim who guard the Azores? Frag the Gemara, what's the shayla of Yerushalayim Bas Asuya Egla Rufahi? Is Yerushalayim, is there a chiv for the residents of Yerushalayim to bring an Egla Rufa? Even if there was a genuine case of a mace, Noida, and it's not known who killed this mace, and it's close to Yerushalayim, the city of Yerushalayim is not obligated to bring an Egla Rufa. Ba'atanya, we learned in the Braisa that Asara Dvarim Nemro B'Yerushalayim, there were 10 things that were said in Yerushalayim, V'zu Achas Mehem, and this is one of them. Eina Mevia Egla Rufa. Yerushalayim does not bring an Egla Rufa. So what is the shayla over here? And furthermore, Loi Noida Mihi Koks, by the Chiv of Egla Rufa, it says it's not known who killed this man's Vaha Noida Mihi Ko. And in this incident over here, in this case over here, this tragedy, it's known who killed the Kohen. It was the other Kohen that was racing with him. Ella, the Gemara says, it's not really a shaila. It's not a shaila be'etzem who brings Egla Rufa. Nobody brings Egla Rufa. It was only done to bring the people to tears, to bring them to, with emotion, to feel how great the tragedy is. As the Maharsha explains, it shows that you need a kapara. The fact that there is a dead body and loy noida mi'iko, even if you don't know who the killer is, so it's not a question of prosecuting the killer or the suspected killer. Nevertheless, for this misa, there has to be a kapara. Now over here, we can't bring an Egla Rufa. It's lacking a kapara, and they need a kapara. So that motivated the people, and that brought them to tears. And then Maharsha explains, the Hemshech is that the father of the Nifter said that his misa should be a kapara. He says this misa, his misa should be a kapara. And he said, however, that the son had not yet been Nifter, and therefore there's no tumah, and therefore the knife is not tameh. That teaches you that it was more severe to them, the tar of the kalim, that the kalim should not become tameh, they should remain tar, more than sheichas damim, more than the killing. So what is the severity? What is the relative severity? Is it sheichas damim with the zal? Was it that shvichas damim was not so chomer to them? It was zal. They treated less stringently. Aval taras kelim get a kaima, but taras kelim, and they had the same level of a chomer for it and reverence for it. Is that the pshat? And therefore, it was that the shvichas damim was zal, not that they were overly stringent about the taras kelim. Or maybe Shichas Dam was as it was before. Aval Taras Kelim Uda Chamira, but Taras Kelim they were extraordinarily Chomer Machmir with Taras Kelim. Since the Brisa brings a proof from the Pasuk, it says that Menashe, who was a Melech, he killed in much innocent blood, and he filled Yerushalayim with blood. You learn out from here that they treated the Shichos Damim leniently. The Taras Kalim get a kaima, and Taras Kalim had the same level of severity. Not that it was more chomer to them. It was that the Shichos Damim was Now the Gemara is going to discuss now the mitzvah of the Trumas Hadeshin and the Haitzos Hadeshin, the removing of the ash from the Mizbeach, and then removing it and taking it outside. So initially there was a Trumas Hadeshin. There was a portion of the Deshin that was separated and that was put on the east side of the Kevesh. And then there was also the removal, which was taken outside the city and put into the place of the dump where they put the Deshin outside the city, when there was, from time to time, there was a removal of the ashes. Ton Rabbanon, the Pasuk says, it says in the Pasuk that the Kayan says, Upashat es begadav. It says he removes his clothing. V'lovash begadam acherim. He wears different clothing. V'haitzi es hadeshin el michutz l'machta el makom tzar. And then he removes the ashes outside the machna. So what does it mean over here that he wears begadam acherim? So Shamani kederach Yom Kippur. So I might think that therefore it's like the change of clothing that the Kohen Gadol does on Yom Kippur. Shepaishet big day kaidish, shalevesh big day chol. So therefore, meaning what happens within Yom Kippur? On Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol changes from big day Lavan, big day Zahav, big day Zahav, big day Lavan. He's wearing different types of clothing. Now they're both kaidish, of course, but he changes it to a different level, a different darga of clothing, a different type of clothing. So I might think over here also, where the Kohen Hedget, he's removing it. When it says that of a lovish begodim acherim, it means a different category of clothing. And therefore, you would say, therefore, that the Haitzos Hadeshin, the removal of the Deshin, is not required to be done with Big Day Kahuna. It's Big Day Chol. It's regular clothing. So I might have said that Talmud Leimer Ufashat as begadav v'lovish begadim acher. It says Ufashat as begadav and v'lovish begadim acher. It could have said acherim, but it says begadim. So therefore, we make a hekish between the begadim. Makish begadim shalovish begadim shapaishin. So there's a hekish comparison with the clothing that he removed to the clothing that he puts on. So Malhal and Big Day Kaidesh, just like before. In the case of the Trumas Hadeshin, it was Big Day Kaidesh. Avkan, Big Day Kaidesh. Here also, for the Haitzos Hadeshin, it's also Big Day Kaidesh. That's what the Tanakama is learning. So what does it mean acherim? So the Tanakama says it doesn't mean Big Day Chol. It means Pchusim. It means a lower quality. It's somewhat worn out. It's a lower quality of clothing, but it's still Big Day Kahuna. That's what the Tanakama holds. Rabbi Eliezer, he says no. He darshan velovash begadim acherim v'haitzi. The Pasuk says that he wears begadim acherim v'haitzi yasadesh al mechutz l'machna. It says we darshan acherim v'haitzi. So he darshans the acherim going on the Haitzos Hadeshin, limud al kohanim bali mumin shikshem la Haitzos Hadeshin. It's not a limud on the clothing; it's a limud on the kohanim. It says acherim v'haitzi, different ones remove it. Meaning, as far as the Trumas Hadeshin is concerned, therefore, as far as that is concerned, you would have to have kohanim which are not bali mumin. That the Kohanim that are right to do the Avodah, because the Trumas Hadeshin is a full-fledged Avodah. But it's limit al Kohanim Bali Mumin Shikshem La Hoitzi Hadeshin. For Haitzos Hadeshin, it's kosher with Bali Mumin. Over there, it is kosher with a Kohen that's Bali Mumin. There is a discussion in the Rishonim, what does Rabbi Eliezer hold as far as the Begadim? Does he say that the Begadim, does he agree with the Tanakama And does he say that the begodim have to be bigdei kahuna? Or does he say, and that is the way Taisus learns, or does he say that no, since you can have with a kind of a bali mumin, then you don't even need bigdei kahuna? That's the way the Ritva learns. Now Taisus is saying that he agrees with Tanakam because we don't see that there's a machlokes on this issue. But al-Kopanim, that is a machlokes. What does Rabbi Elazar hold as far as the begonim? Do you need for the Hitzal Sadesh, and do you need bigdei kahuna or even bigdei chol? But he does say that kind of balimum are kosher for the Hitzal Sadesh. Omar Ma, the Tanakam says achirim pchusim. He says that the begonim achirim are lower quality. They are not bigdei chol, but they're lower quality. That is consistent with what we learned in Tanabei Rishol. Tanabei Rishol begodim should be shalbem keder l'rabbi lo yimzog behem kois l'rabbi. It's the proper covet that a servant that is cooking the clothing that he wears in the kitchen, cooking, he doesn't come and serve his master with the same clothing. He doesn't serve him wine with the same clothing. He's as a butler, as a servant, as a waiter, he's dressed with proper clothing. He doesn't dress with the clothing that he cooks, which might get dirty. Similarly, the Hitzal Sadesh is removing the ash, so it's likely that the begonim would get dirty, would get soiled with the ashes. That's not the same begonim, those are not the same begonim, rather, that he would do the avodah of Haroma Sadeshin. The Haroma Sadeshin is not a large quantity of ash, it's not the same. It would not be the same clothing that he does the Trumas Hadeshin, which is an avodah, which is a full-fledged avodah to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom with the same clothing. So we have a machlokes between Tanakam and Rabbi Elazar if a kohen bal mum can do the Hitzal Hadeshin. Amar Rish Lakish says kemachlokes b'Hitzal. He says, just like we have this machlokes of a kohen bal mum by the Hitzal Sadeshin, Rish Lakish says kach machlokes b'Aroma. He says that even by the Trumas Sadeshin, the Rabbi Elazar would also say that a kohen bal mum is kosher, and the Tanakam would argue. But Rav Yochanan Omer, he says no, machlokes b'Hitzal. That's a machlokes only b'Hitzal. Aval b'Haroma divra kol avodah. But the Trumas Sadeshin divra kol, it's a full-fledged avodah, and it cannot be done with a kohen bal mum. So my time with the Rish Lakish, why does Rish Lakish say that it's the same machlokes by the Trumas Hadeshin? Amallah, because he would say, if you would think that the Trumas Hadeshin is a full-fledged avodah, is it a full-fledged avodah that can be done with only 2 of the 4 bigdei kahuna? It can't be. So therefore, it must be that it's not a full-fledged avodah. And the pasuk says that as far as the Trumas Hadeshin, the pasuk says v'lovash hakayin midoi bad. It says that he wears his midoi bad, which he wears the tunic, and it says u'michnei bad yilbash al basar, and he wears the pants. And then it says v'hirim Hadeshin asher toichal eish ashoel hamizbech v'someitz hamizbech. And he does the Trumas Hadeshin, he puts it by the Mizbech, the east side of the Kevesh. Now it only mentions these 2 articles of clothing. There's only 2 articles of clothing mentioned. If it would be a full-fledged avodah, you need the bigdei kahuna. You can't do the avodah without the bigdei kahuna. Doesn't that show you that it's not a full-fledged avodah? And if it's not a full-fledged avodah, it should be kosher with a kohen bal mum. But Rav Yochanan, he says no. Goli Rachman B'Kasayim. It doesn't mean that these are the only 2. The Torah is megala with these 2, but it applies also to the hat and the belt. It mentions these 2, but that's just megala that you need bigdei kahuna. You don't just have only these 2; you have all 4. Umay shnohani. According to Rav Yochanan, why are these 2 mentioned? If really it includes all 4 begodim, why dafka are these 2 mentioned? We learn now to teach us 2 separate halachas. Really, it didn't have to mention any of the begodim because there's a kohen, and therefore, since it says a kohen, we know that the kohen is only has bekihuna, is what is wearing the bigdei kahuna. And it says v'lovash hakayin. It's not to teach me about the bigdei kahuna. It's to teach me these separate halachas. Midoi bad. It's to teach you midoi kimidosai. That midoi is also a lashon of the moda. That midah kamidosa, the clothing have to be made according to the measurements of the kind. They have to be made to measure. It has to be fit according to his size. And Mechasei Bad, why does it say the pants? How do I know that the pants are the first article of clothing that the kohen puts on? Shenemar u'mechasei bad yilbash al basara. He bears the mechasayim al his basar, meaning that there's nothing on his basar, and the first thing that's on his basar is the mechasayim. So the mechasayim is the first article of clothing that he wears. Reish Lakish, Mida Kamidosa, now Reish Lakish says that these are mentioned to teach you only these two articles of clothing. How does he learn out these two additional halachas? Reish Lakish, Mida Kamidosa. How do I know that? Mida Ma'akme Rachman B'Loshen Mida. Because since the Torah says a Loshen of Mida, it doesn't use the normal Loshen which regularly used is the Kesainis. It switches the Loshen, it says Mida. It says Mida, Shelo Yehei Davar. So therefore we learn out rather that this additional halacha that it has to be kimidosai. Now, shaloyei davar koyam l'mechlasayim. How do I know that from? It's not from the fact that the mechlasayim are mentioned, but me al basora nafka. It didn't have to say al basora. It says yilbash. It could have said yilbash. It doesn't have to say al basora, and therefore you learn out this additional halacha that the mechlasayim are first. Let's say this machlokes Reish Lakish and Rav Yochanan is a machlokes of the following Tanoim. It says al basara ma Talmud loimer yilbash. Why does it say yilbash lahavi misnefes va'avnet laharana? To teach you that for the Trumas Hadeshin, it's not only these two clothing articles of clothing; it's also the misnefes, the hat, and the belt. Div Rabbi Yehuda. So for the Trumas Hadeshin, you need all four clothing. Rabbi Daisa says, no, it's for a different reason. L'Rabbi speak de kain gadol b'yom kippurim sheksherim l'kain hedget. It's to teach you that the begonim, the four articles of clothing, the big day love that the kain gadol wears on Yom Kippur, those same clothing, those same articles of clothing can be worn by a kain hedget the rest of the year. The Kain Gadol, it says that after he does the avoid in the Kaddish Kadashim, it says v'hinicham sham, that he leaves it there. So you might think that it means that it has to be hidden away. It's Ton Genizah. So therefore, it's coming to teach you that no, that those clothing, it doesn't mean that it has to be buried. It can't be used for another Yom Kippur, but a Kain Hedget could wear those clothing. Shiksharim l'Kain Hedget. It says that's why the word Yilbash. It says Yilbash over here. The extra yilbash, and we make a gzer shava too with the kain gadol Yom Kippur. That's a tzayis spot kodesh yilbash, a gzer shava to teach me that these clothing, the same articles of clothing, can be worn by a kain hedget for the rest of the year. We'll continue this discussion into the next Amud.